This is Neil deGrasse Tyson. And Neil deGrasse Tyson, for those that don't know, is an astrophysicist and a current darling of the woke movement. He's a well-known agnostic, in his own words, and I would say for the last 4 years, he has become increasingly welcomed in by the woke movement, and this has led to a few sort of oxymoronic statements and things that he comes out with that kind of leave us scratching our heads, particularly for a scientist. He is a self-declared, and by role, I guess, science communicator, whatever that is. And I know that he has a lot to do. His sort of prime position is to get across the message of science to the kids. He's not without his own difficulties in life. He has had 1 or 2 scandals, or 3 or 4. And he has recently been on the Ben Shapiro show. So Ben Shapiro, as many of you probably know, is a fundamentalist Jewish man who used to kind of consider himself conservative, but I've recently heard him considering himself as a libertarian. They had I think it was an hour and 10 minute long interview, and around 15 minutes of the interview was devoted purely to the LGBTQIA plus movement, and why it's sort of an issue for most average people. And it kind of left me frustrated, a little bit perturbed. I just think, to myself, are we really at a point now where our leading science communicator for our kids is telling our kids the same sort of things that you would hear on MSNBC or, the Trevor Noah show, or, direct from Vox and places like that? Anyway, I just wanted to talk about the 10 or 11 minute segment that I saw. I know the full one is out now. And it was most of all about LGBTQ and its effect on society as a whole and the LGBTQ people as a whole, and whether or not we should be doing scientific investigations into the phenomenon, why it's increasing, and those sorts of things. Now, just before I do that, I'm just going to lay a sort of a foundation of something that Neil deGrasse Tyson said only about 4 years ago. He said, no matter when or where you live, no matter what your nationality or age or aesthetic proclivities, no matter your religion or whether you vote Democrat or Republican, if you calculate the value of pi, you will get the same answer as everybody else in the universe. Constants such as pi enjoy a level of internationality that human affairs do not, never did, and never will. Now, it's interesting that he said that then, which was 2017, because it's around about the same time that he was kind of making his move, whether it was by his own heart, or whether it was by money, or it just happened. But he was sort of moving from being a relatively moderate left-wing scientist, although he says he never cares about politics, to more of a progressive, somebody that's appearing on all of the things that I mentioned before, all of the types of shows that I mentioned before, not just sort of middle-of-the-road ones. So what he's essentially saying there is that we have truth, and we have proof of truth, and that that gives us a base to move from. And then he says, but, in society and people, it's much more complicated than that. And I would say, I understand, roughly, I can relate to what he's saying to a point. But I sort of feel like what he's allowing himself to do there is play both sides. So he's like, well, of course I'm a scientist. Like, pie is always going to be pie. And then he's like, but, in people, can't really, shouldn't really say what's what. And then in brackets, because it might make me unpopular. So with Ben Shapiro, Ben talks to him about how LGBTQ and the sort of phenomenon of LGBTQ is increasing in number. We're seeing a much greater number of children being diagnosed with gender dysphoria and being passed on to medical organisations to let's say deal with it in air quotes. And obviously it's having an effect on sport. And then also, from the LGBTQ point of view, and I'm not going to say, because this doesn't include everybody that's gay or lesbian or whatever. I think there's a very sort of select group of people where their whole life is about that, like Douglas Murray says. And anyway, they are essentially talking about the sort of effects it'll have and whether it should be looked into. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is sort of doing his best Stevie Wonder impression, looking at all of the corners in the room around him. Just mustn't look at Ben. Don't look into the eyes. And he seemed to be doing that in his mind as well, because he was sort of dodging a lot of questions and just playing semantics. It was really frustrating. I mean, I saw a lot of people in the comments saying, wow, when did Neil deGrasse Tyson become a postmodernist? They were taught. So he said, we only care about this because of sport. We segregate ourselves in sport. That's it. That's why. Well, of course we segregate ourselves in sport. Men and women are massively different beasts. And it doesn't even matter if it's if it's not a sport where weight classes are a thing. Obviously you've got rowing, rugby, gridiron football, basketball. Because a 140-pound man is going to be a much, much different beast to a 140-pound woman. And, if we're talking about transgender, 140-pound trans woman is still going to have harder bones, more efficient muscles, much more efficient fast twitch muscles, and much more efficient fast twitch eyesight as well. I believe the figure is 60% more efficient muscles per pound of muscle, which is nuts. So he's sort of claiming that it's all about the sport, and if we can get past that, then it's all home and dry. I would disagree. I think there are other issues as well. And listen, he made a point in there where he was saying, it's always the people that talk about rights and the Constitution. Those are the people that are going to come down and take the rights away from these people. Well, they're just not. I just think that it's when it starts affecting people's kids, and it's sort of becoming like pushed into their face on a daily basis, you will get people that begin to push back a bit. We've seen the numbers of kids being diagnosed with gender dysmorphia or dysphoria, whichever one it is, going up from, in the UK certainly, from 2 a month to 14,000 a year, which is fairly terrifying. So Neil goes on to talk with Ben. Well, he sort of molds his question into one that he can answer without, whilst saving face. And the question that he sort of poses to himself almost is, well, are you saying that what you're really asking is that we should sometimes not look into things with the scientific method? Science needs to be careful what it's looking into and releasing that material. And he essentially went on to say that, yes, we should. In fact, he literally says we should shield those that may be affected by the results. Well, hold on. Like, you can't... There's truth and non-truth. And even if you don't want to say that there is definite truth. There is the best that we know and everything else. And I just cannot believe that we're at a point now where our, biggest, what do they call them, biggest science communicators are just bending the knee massively. There is no way in Neil deGrasse Tyson's mind, he actually thinks that if you had like 145 pound woman go up against a 145 pound guy with a beard and a bow in his hair, but that is claiming to be a woman because they've taken the right medication. And people might say, oh, you're exaggerating, you're going way too far. No. These things have happened, and the more that is accepted, the sort of wilder it becomes, and that is something that we have 100% seen. The fact that he is trying to sort of claim that these things are something that we really need to try and very carefully resolve is worrying, because you always look at scientists for the people that can say, well, regardless of what you think, this is how it is. And this is, here are some ideas of what you can do. So, for me personally, I think that you have to segregate the sexes in sport, because otherwise it's just unfair. I thought we spent 50 years trying to help women. Kind of seems like we're not anymore. And, if we want to start transgender leagues, then we can. And people say, well, there just aren't enough people to be a transgender league around here. Fine. Like, I live somewhere where there weren't enough kids in my age group to have a particular sports team. So we just didn't have a team that year. Or some people went to a place where there were. Like, that's how it works in life. You're not entitled to have every single thing you want. And if you can't get it in a manner that is convenient for everyone else, well, by gum, you'll get it in a manner full stop or period. So I would recommend you guys go and check that episode out, or at the very least that short clip. I will leave a little bit in here just so that you can have a look and tell me what you think, because I know that some people love him, some people don't like him particularly, some people love Shapiro and some people don't. I'm kind of 50-50 on both. I think both of them have good points at times and also sound ridiculous at times. I'm kind of a bit gutted that Ben didn't push back a lot, but I think he was probably just grateful to have somebody there from the progressive left to sort of try and have a talk. But yeah, so here is some of that clip, and feel free to go and check it out. I will leave a link in the description for you guys. Thanks for stopping by, and I will see you soon.
And have you actually ever met Heather Swanson?
No, I've never competed against her before, no.
She's not exactly your average trans athlete.
Well, what is an average trans athlete? Honestly, I find that kind of bigoted, David.
Okay. Heather Swanson is actually joining us now. Miss Swanson, how does it feel to be competing today?
I can't tell you how free I feel now that I've started identifying as a woman. Now that I can compete as female, I'm ready to smash the other girls.
And is it correct you just started identifying as female 2 weeks ago?
I'm not here to talk about my transition. I'm here to kick some ass. Let me tell you something.
How it's people in society.
But this is a perfect example of an area where suddenly it doesn't matter to say things that are just true. Like, why is it bad or wrong to point out?
I have another way to approach this. I care what is objectively true in the world as a scientist. But let me not say even as a scientist. I just simply care what is objectively true. And science happens to be a pretty potent path to invoke, to find out what is true. And so if people express themselves on a gender spectrum, and that is an actual thing in an actual society, if we have not fully explained that scientifically, that's an interesting frontier to study. If you want to say it's only sociological, then it's the purview of the social sciences. I don't care who studies it. It's an interesting fact about society. that's worth learning about. If to fight someone and say it's not biological, it's just your this. It's real and it's there.
Well,
because it's real because it manifests.
But it is real because it manifests. But the question of how to classify manifestation is a scientific question, meaning that, for example, there was a woman over at Brown University. She came out with a study that suggested that there was a phenomenon called rapid onset gender dysphoria, in which a member of a particular group would suffer from gender dysphoria, and this person's immediate peer group would suddenly have an onset of gender dysphoria. This paper was so controversial that Brown tried to pull it, and then was forced to reassign it later. You see this sort of treatment.
That's a different question. What you're asking now is, are there some topics that should not be studied scientifically?
Right.
And is there some taboo? And Sam Harris speaks a lot about this.
Yes.
And I think the concern is, if you study some topic that's a hot button topic and you bring scientific methods and tools to it, we don't trust. I'm interpreting here. I think we as a society don't trust that people in charge in a free country won't try to legislate something that will constrict people's freedoms in the face of that information. I think that's the fear.
Well, isn't that...
It's a fear.
I mean, and isn't that...
We don't trust our own ability to govern ourselves in the face of what could be some information relative to other kinds of information.
Isn't that a bit of a problem?
Yes. Yeah. It's not. It means it's not a free society. It's not a society of free inquiry, which I think you need ultimately. But yeah.
My general take on all of this stuff, from climate change to gender dysphoria to all of these issues, is bring out the science and then let's hash it out.